Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of GeoData Vision.
Len, always a pleasure to see you. So what interesting topics did you bring for our discussion today?
Well, Dean, I try to stay on top and up to date on topics of concern to compliance officers by listening to the questions posed by our many clients. But I also read posts online, and in particular, I read the questions posed on a website known as Bankers Online. Recently, I've heard a number of questions about CRA assessment areas, which seem to reflect confusion, or at least a lack of clarity on the part of some CRA officers. For decades, I've been preaching that the delineation of a bank's CRA assessment area is by far the most important decision made by a bank. It dictates not only a bank's performance numbers, it also determines the benchmarks used by examiners to rate a bank's CRA performance. So I think it's time to once again revisit the topic of CRA assessment area delineation and why it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. That does sound very interesting, Len. So where do you want to start?
Well, I thought let's begin by looking at the prescriptions and proscriptions contained in the Community Reinvestment Act. Subsection .41 contains the relevant language. It's pretty straightforward. A bank must delineate census tracts in their entirety. You can't take a part of a census tract. It's all or nothing. It must include all the census tracts where a bank contains any deposit-taking facilities and the surrounding tracts where it has extended a substantial portion of its loans. It cannot avoid low or moderate income census tracts, and it may not reflect illegal discrimination, and generally should include a MSA, metropolitan division, or county, but can be adjusted to the area the bank can, quote, reasonably be expected to serve.
Okay, Len. So it looks like there are specific requirements and, of course, limitations, but the phrase, quote, reasonably can be expected to serve appears to give banks quite a bit of latitude. Can you expand?
Oh, yes, Dean, you are correct. And that's an opportunity for a bank to designate a realistic assessment area. For many community banks, assessment areas consisting of an entire MSA or metropolitan division or even whole counties are areas too large to practically serve. And that's a prescription for a difficult CRA exam, to say the least. Remember, the Community Reinvestment Act boils down to one simple question. How is a bank performing, meeting the credit needs of its entire community? But if an assessment area is configured to be too large for a bank to serve, that's a setup for a CRA exam failure. After all, how can a bank be expected to serve the needs of a community that's too big to serve? A good example can be found in a situation I encountered many years ago. We were advising a bank that was located in lower Los Angeles County. The bank had only one deposit-taking facility, but it had designated Los Angeles County in its entirety, all 2,497 census tracts, as its assessment area. And not only was the assessment area far too large for the bank, but they were competing with 1,394 branches of other banks. And that doesn't include credit unions and mortgage companies. To say the least, it was an impossible situation. But the bank put itself at risk of failing their CRA exam because they couldn't possibly serve such a large market and compete with such severe competition. And the numbers proved it. The bank's penetration rates in the low and moderate income tracts and lending to low and moderate income borrowers were far below the market, immediately putting them in jeopardy of failing their CRA exam.
Yeah, it seems oftentimes that bankers tend to conflate fair lending and CRA, but don't examiners consider the performance context in those situations, Len?
Well, they can do so, but why put a bank in a situation in which it is immediately on the defense and dependent on the reasonableness and goodwill of examiners? That's a prescription for an anxiety attack.
Yeah. So did you make a recommendation? And if so, what was it to that bank?
Well, we reviewed the geographic dispersion of their lending, which was concentrated in a 5-mile radius around their only office. In fact, some of their lending was in Orange County, which was less than 1 mile from where their office was located. So we recommended the bank annex about 80 census tracts in Los Angeles and 30 census tracts in Orange County. All fell within 5 miles of the branch. Based on that assessment area delineation, the bank exceeded the CRA performance benchmarks under the various CRA lending tests, the assessment area ratio, the geographic dispersion test, and the borrower characteristics test.
So the bank easily passed its CRA exams, what you're saying.
Well, yes, but there was an unexpected wrinkle. Examiners objected to the custom assessment area delineation, although they acknowledged that the bank could adjust its assessment area as it had done.
So I'm a little confused, I guess. So what's the problem, Len?
Well, honestly, initially I didn't know, but a few years later, I was presenting at the California Bankers Regulatory Compliance Conference, and my topic was the importance of assessment area configuration. Immediately after my presentation, there was a line of bankers who wanted to ask me questions. And the very first person in line was a CRA officer from the bank I was been describing. She told me about the examiner's resistance to the adjusted assessment area and asked if I knew why examiners objected and was so clearly allowed by the regulations. Before I could respond to her, the gentleman behind her interjected, I can tell you the answer. I'm a former FDIC examiner. So we all looked at him and said, okay, so what's the story? And his response was, get this, they're lazy. And we said, what? What do you mean? He explained that the examiners use standardized tables that are based on MSAs, metropolitan divisions, or entire counties. And when a bank exercises its right to adjust the assessment area that it regionally could be expected to serve, examiners must go back and rebuild all those tables, and it's a lot of work.
Okay, so how does a bank go about evaluating its assessment area to make sure it complies with the regulation, is realistic, and makes it easier to pass the CRA exam?
Well, today, Dean, there are many mapping programs and services that make it easy to evaluate many possible assessment area configurations and how a bank's performance compares in the various alternative configurations. Now, large banks tend to have the software in-house for this purpose, while community banks tend to contract with a service provider. At GeoDataVision, we conduct what we call CRA assessment area tune-up sessions, in which we review a bank's CRA performance in internet sessions using live dynamic maps that can be manipulated to paint a picture of different possible assessment area configuration. It's easy to see the look of the alternative assessment area configurations while simultaneously displaying a table depicting the CRA lending test performance results of each assessment area configuration. Even the smallest bank can take advantage of the sophisticated mapping technology to examine this very important question. It's highly visual and it's very exact.
Yeah, well, I can certainly attest, Len. We at M&M Consulting have participated with you as well as many of our clients in those assessment area tune-up sessions, as they call them, and they're literally eye-opening. I'm amazed how easy it is for a bank to see its options. And of course, more importantly, the board, who are not necessarily bankers. How often do you recommend a bank review its assessment area?
Well, we recommend that a bank review its assessment area at least once a year. And by the way, once you do that, it's a best practice to review the results with the board, either recommending a change in the assessment area or just maintaining it as it is. That proves to examiners that the board is on top of things and is exercising its oversight responsibility. But aside from an annual review, anytime a bank opens or closes branches or is considering acquiring another bank, it's a good practice to examine the implications of how assessment area configuration may be affected by any of that activity.
Yeah, and I can tell you, we recommend annual CRA assessment area reviews. I think it's extremely important, and I've always preached proactive approach to everything instead of reacting once an examiner's got you in the headlights. Facts and circumstances change, and even the perfect assessment area can become outdated in a couple of years. So it's too important to ignore. Bankers no longer need to to operate in the dark and adopt assessment areas that may set them up for apparent CRA shortcomings. This topic is way too important to overlook, and I will tell you, Len, it's something that I hope you continue to talk about and emphasize the importance of the delineation of the assessment area as well as CRA overall. So great job. This is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting.
And this is Led Suzio with Geodata Vision saying, we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast. We encourage you to send us your feedback and any ideas you may have for future podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and Geodata Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.